For where? All right, good morning, everyone. We're on lesson 4 of our study of the life of Joseph, My Life for the Kingdom. Today's lesson is kind of another wrinkle in Joseph's life. We know that he has several times where he rises and falls and rises and falls. So this is one of those, what you might call a step backward, but also a step closer to Pharaoh. Let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, in your word, you've given us clear and certain promises about how you have saved us and what you have in store for us in heaven. We thank you for these promises and trust that you will preserve us in them as you guide and shape our lives. Give us insight into the mystery of your plans for us in your kingdom. And above all, give us patient endurance as you lead us on to our heavenly home. Amen. So last time we saw how the jealousy and hatred of Joseph's brothers, by God's plan, put Joseph right where God wanted him. He was in the home of Potiphar, the captain of the guard, so real close, if you will, to Pharaoh. Today we're going to see how God again uses the negative actions of someone, this time being Potiphar's wife, to put him even closer to Pharaoh, to put him into the prison where the highest level officials in the kingdom were kept. And we'll see how God's plan begins to unfold. So first of all, look at Joseph and Potiphar's wife. From Genesis 39. So now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went to the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Potiphar's wife was persistent. How did this make the temptation that Joseph faced, particularly difficult in this case? Yes, Blake?
He had to fight it again and again.
Okay, so he had to fight it again and again. I mean, it wasn't just like where she made one attempt and then left him alone after that point. What else would make it difficult? Him.
He saw her on a regular basis.
Okay, I mean, he has to see her and has to interact with her on a regular basis. I mean, it's not someone where he could just say, well, okay, I'm just going to not see that person anymore. I'm not going to go to that part of the building anymore, or something like that. Yes?
Being regular, I mean, the Bible doesn't tell us that he has a significant other otherwise, and he's a guy, and so he probably is looking for, it's probably tempting to him.
Yes, I mean, so he's a young man, okay, and we all know Joseph was a human being, just like the rest of us are human beings, right? And we all know how things are in our youth, especially, how these temptations can be even more pointed for us. And also difficult, I mean, think of the power differential between the two, right? I mean, yes, Joseph was the head and servant in the household, but she had even more power than he. If she wanted to, she could make his life pretty difficult. She could decide, well, you're going to be fired, or maybe even worse. And what are some worldly reasons that Joseph could have used to resist her advances? And what reason does he end up using instead? So first of all, what are some worldly reasons that Joseph could have used to say, well, hey, this isn't something we should do. Yes?
It's a complicated workplace relationship.
Okay, so you could say, well, hey, this is going to get messy, or it could get messy. Okay? What else? Yes? Okay, one of the reasons that he does give is he takes and he says, I'm the head steward of this household, and the master has given me everything except you, and he really encourages her, be faithful to your duty, to your calling as the master's wife. Okay? What other reasons, worldly reasons, doesn't he give?
He's not into her.
Okay, he doesn't say, well, hey, I'm not attracted to you. Okay? Yes, Sue.
I guess if she got pregnant.
Okay, he doesn't say, well, hey, you could get pregnant, and that could be like a real problem with Potiphar. Doesn't say well, what if we get caught? Okay. What reason does he end up giving? So he gives the if you will, the 10th commandment reason of saying, hey, be faithful to your duty, be faithful in your heart to your master. 6th commandment reason too. But what does he end up saying to her? When she tries again and again, even, grabs hold of him. What? He flees. What reason does he give, though, as he flees?
How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?
Okay, he takes and he says, hey, this is straight, plain wicked. Okay? And he says, this is a sin against God. I cannot do this. So he remains faithful to the Lord and keeps the Lord as his primary relationship. Well, lust and sexual temptations come at us continually from every direction, from our own sinful hearts, as Jesus says, those things rise up in the heart. From the behavior of others, as in this case, from literature, media, internet, advertisements, and so on. What practical pointers does Joseph give us in resisting those temptations? So you already mentioned one, Chrissy, take and flee from the temptation, okay? If possible, physically leave the place where the temptation is, if that's possible. What other things might be just practical pointers that are wise when it comes to, hey, how can I avoid these things? Or mitigate against them. Yes, Anne, do you have another one?
He tried not to himself even in those situations.
Okay, so he takes it, he makes an effort to say, I'm not even going to be alone with her. I mean, that's a good one too. I mean, if someone is sexually tempted with somebody, to take and say, well, you know what, I'm just going to make sure there's always someone else around all the time. Okay? That is a good plan. Any others?
I guess just recognize that it's a sin.
Okay, recognize it as a sin. Acknowledge, hey, this isn't, the sinful nature in us wants to say like, oh, this could be fun, or this could be exciting, or whatever. Recognize, no, it's not fun, it's not exciting, it's sin, period. Okay? And it is always helpful, for us to think of temptation like a lure, a fishing lure, right? That, that fishing lure to the fish looks real yummy, real tasty. Oh, it's so bright and shiny, and oh, I bet that's going to be wonderful. And then, right? Then you're hooked, and you've got hooks inside your guts, right? And that's what the devil does with these things too. When it comes to lust and temptation, he always makes it like, oh, it's going to be fun, it'll be exciting. And then the moment it happens, then all of a sudden you're hooked and you're getting dragged along. Some other just things are maybe similar to the not being alone. Don't be alone with the person. We have different temptations in our modern society thanks to internet and cell phones and all those things. But one thing that can be helpful, like in our family, we take and we have it where, when we're on our phones and on the internet and the computer, we do that all in the living room area, so that then you're all there together as a family. Okay, so now we're like, oh, I'm by myself in the back of the house and no one else knows what I maybe should or shouldn't be looking at. No, we're all right there. I can look at your screen, you can look at my screen any moment, and just to help, again, just to help practically curb those temptations that are out there. Anyone have anything else on these points about practical ways that we can resist such temptations? All right, so she grabs hold of Jacob, and she grabs his outer garment, and he even runs out in the house. So when she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out in the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "The Hebrew slave you brought us came to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. What do you think of Potiphar's reaction? Do a little bit of reading between the lines here, maybe. I know we can't say some of these things I'm about to say dogmatically, but read between the lines a little bit.
I'll get you.
What?
I'll get you.
Get who? Get Joseph?
Yes, she would get Joseph, because he did not consent to what she wanted. So it was kind of like a betrayal of her, and she was going to teach him a lesson.
So you're saying that she's getting back at Joseph. Am I hearing you right? Okay, yes. Okay.
He believed everything that came out of her mouth.
Potiphar did? Well, I wonder about that. I wonder about that.
I was going to say the same thing. He didn't kill him immediately, so he kind of said, "Oh well, I need to make the wife happy. I'll, put him in jail." I don't know.
You could even argue he believed Joseph's side completely and realized, okay, I gotta remove the threat.
Okay.
And again, I get that this is translated, but when he heard the story his wife told, that insinuates maybe to me that
And it says that a couple times. It says, "This is the story she told, the story, the story." Now put yourself in Potiphar's point of view. What are you supposed to do? Okay, my wife says that my slave who's been godly in every other way and who has, prospered everything that I've done and been utterly faithful in everything I can possibly think of, claims that he now suddenly one day tried to sexually attack her, and not just like in a mild way, so much so that he would, undress with her or whatever, okay? She claims this, and now what is he supposed to do? Think of him as a husband, and okay, now my honor is at stake, right? I mean, I can either take and who do I believe? Now, if I take and believe my slave over my wife, what does that mean for our marriage relationship, And if I don't, well then, and I believe that Joseph is actually innocent, and it's my wife that's making advances on my head slave, well then what does that say about me as a man and a husband, right? And notice that it says that Potiphar burned with anger, but it doesn't say he burned with anger at Joseph. It just says he burned with anger. So I can see Potiphar being mad at his wife, if you will, and saying, "Great, now I'm,
It's kind of a no-win.
Right, it's a no-win for him. It is. It really, really is. So, and like people have said, Potiphar doesn't kill Joseph. I mean, if he really thought that, Joseph tried to sexually attack his wife, I'm sure in Egyptian society there would have been plenty of recourse. I'm not sure if death was an option, but it probably could have been. In most other societies, it would have been. And where does he get put in prison? He gets put in I'm going to say, comparatively, the luxury suite prison, where the king's prisoners are held, not in the lowest dungeon, state penitentiary.
He's in the White House.
Right, he's in the White House prisoner, Okay.
He could have
Yeah, he could have done that too, I guess. He could have, that could have been another option. Maybe he just thinks, what, this has caused me all kinds of grief. I'll just take and get this guy totally out of my hair. He'll be in prison. Yes?
I think at this point, Potiphar, knows his wife too, and how maybe vindictive she could be. So,
Yeah, you would think that he would have an idea of that, that she's that kind of person, or that kind of thing is in her personality.
Yeah, in some ways, it seems that he probably was already aware that she was like that. Maybe tried it with some others, so he may be more wise to it than the story is telling us. And so he's going to make sure he goes kind of even course.
Mhm.
Maybe his whole intent was, we'll put him in prison for a while and take him out and everything's cool down. So
Maybe.
maybe.
What did Joseph get in return for his faithfulness to the Lord? How is that a reality check for us as we strive to serve the Lord in holiness? Joseph was totally faithful to God here,
Got jail time.
He got jail time. He got jail time for being faithful, for saying, nope, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that sin. And he goes from being, living a life of great responsibility, and in terms of the people in that time, probably one of the highest, the highest lives that you could have, or the best quality life you could have. And he goes to being put in, prison. How is the reality check for us as we strive for holiness? Yes, Glenn.
We are reminded that our reward ultimately is in heaven, intangible on earth.
Very good. Our final reward is with our God, right? And there's a tendency we sometimes might have to think, well, if I do the right thing, then everything should just be good for me, smooth sailing, no problems, everyone like me, and nope. Okay. And again, the perfect example of that is our Lord Jesus, right? He's the one who never did anything wrong, not even once, and treated everyone with self-sacrificing love, and yet he was hated, rejected, and people said, we got to get rid of this guy. So, as we follow the Lord, don't assume that doing the right godly thing is going to lead towards necessarily less trouble. At times, and oftentimes, it can lead to more, because the world doesn't like that. The world wants us to be like it, not to be like our God. Any questions on that part? We're going to go to Joseph in prison next. All right. Continuing in Genesis 39. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. What remained constant during the seesaw of Joseph's life? What of our lives? Like,
God still watched over Joseph.
God still watched over him? Very good. It says God was with him, even though he was, even though this awful thing had happened to him. What else is?
Just Joseph didn't slough off or start to lose his work ethic.
Okay, so Joseph still, like last time, takes and says, what? Okay, I'm in the prison now, but I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the best darn prisoner there can be. Okay?
And God blessed his work.
And God blessed him. Even in prison, God can bless you. And that's one of the main lessons of Joseph's life, is that God can bless under any circumstances. When we look at being favorable, unfavorable, God can bless anywhere and everywhere. And of course, these things are true for us too. God is always with us, no matter where we go, no matter what ugly turn, humanly speaking, our lives may take. God's love hasn't separated from us, hasn't parted from us, neither has He. and he is going to make things work according to his plan. The Lord continued to shape and train Joseph through this whole ordeal. Discuss how the following would have helped him for being ruler of Egypt. So we did this last time, talking about how being the head steward in Potiphar's house must have helped. How would it have helped in this case, living under the power of other people in prison? So he's now a prisoner in Egypt. Tim.
Humility.
Okay, we taught him humility, right? Say, okay. No, I used to be the one who was on top, and now I'm on the bottom again. And that then takes and helps train one, right? And remember that when you are, because Joseph is going to end up being the second command of all of Egypt, where even Pharaoh is going to say, I'm Pharaoh, but apart from that, no one should lift even a hand or foot unless you tell them to in Egypt. So he's going to all of a sudden have, pretty much unlimited human authority. So taking and knowing what that's like, and knowing what it's like to have someone else boss you around and tell you what to do, can make you sensitive. What about the squalor of prison life? How might that have shaped him? Melody.
To see the poor side of things.
Okay, to see the ugly side of life. That can open our eyes too, can it? Especially if God has blessed us through our lives and we've maybe had things good. To see, well, this is how the other side lives. And this is how bad it can be. And the hurt, the pain.
Also prepare them for the years of famine that were coming when they didn't have much.
Right, okay, yes, to take and say, all right, sometimes people have to get by on way less, as people in prisons do. And take and say, all right, there's going to be a time when we as a whole nation are going to have to get by on less. And again, Joseph's going to have a lot of authority. It might be easy for someone to say, well, take that person and send them to prison. But now Joseph has firsthand experience of, well, what does it mean when you actually send someone to prison? What does it mean to do those kinds of punishments? What would this have taught him about Egyptian political life? Remember, he's in the luxury prison, but what may this have taught him?
He could learn how people thought.
Okay, learn how people think. I mean, it's one thing to be on the right side of the people who are in power, Pharaoh, Potiphar, and so on. Now he's, again, getting to see kind of the other side. Here's the other side of the story, really kind of learning there's two halves to every story, right?
Because he was taken by Potiphar to be his servant, he got to see firsthand the political life because he was right in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm. And now he gets to see the other side of that political life too. With how these Egyptian dynasties work and how politics was back then, it was very much a cutthroat type thing, where it's okay, we're in power right now, but you never know, someone might be rising up trying to take you over or change things.
I think he also saw that he had options for decisions, that he didn't have to always say, okay, if you did this, I'm going to kill you. That there are other things he could do short of bringing the absolute penalty down on people.
Right. I mean, when someone has a lot of power, sometimes the easy thing can be to say, all right, I'm just going to kill you or get rid of you, eliminate you. Okay. But he sees, well, you know what? there's rehabilitation may be possible, or, punishment and correction can be possible.
About it, the way he looking forward to what he did with his brothers, he could have hammered down pretty hard on them.
Mm-hmm.
But, he may have learned that, that Potiphar didn't do that to him when he couldn't. So,
You're right, coming up with his brothers, and Joseph really had them in his mercy and could have done a lot of really nasty things to them, but he takes and he uses restraint and uses a softer touch to take and change their hearts.
I guess he also could have learned from his fellow prisoners what kinds of actions were not acceptable
Okay.
in society.
Yeah, that would have also taught him, what is political life like in Egypt and how far can I go? I remember growing up, I had 3 older brothers, so I always kid with them that, all that I did was I saw mom and dad don't like this, don't like that, don't like this, because I heard then mom and dad sometimes, and so I knew, okay, I can go this far, but don't go there. If you go there, trouble's going to happen, but if you go this far, you're okay. So I was able to know, okay, this is how far I can go, but don't go there. And Joseph may have learned those kinds of lessons too, practical lessons. What about showing love to others?
Being merciful to those less fortunate.
Okay. Being merciful to those less fortunate. He ends up being put in charge of all the other prisoners. And, imagine some of the people that Joseph may have come into contact with and does come into contact with during those several years that he's in this position. They were people who would be, unlovable and despicable, maybe even violent sometimes, but, he would have a chance to show compassion and exercise compassion. And we already talked about, his responsibility and work ethic. Susan brought that up. And, he kept his excellent virtues of saying, okay, I'm in prison now, but, God can bless me here and I'm going to be the best. I recall reading, I think it was by Viktor Frankl, when he was in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. That's one of the things that kept him alive, was saying, well, they want me to do this job, and it would be some, tedious job or some, meant to be humiliating or whatever, something like that. And he would just say, okay, I'm going to do that and, do the best darn job of it, that I possibly can. And it's the same thing, like you tell your kids, we all have to work and do jobs. You can either say, hey, I'm going to do this and be happy doing it and do my best, or I can sit here and complain the whole while and grouch about it and whatever else. The job's still going to get done, and the job doesn't change. It's you and your heart and your attitude towards it that makes all the difference, right? So you can either see work as work or you can see it as play, but it's the same thing. So, that thing here also takes and shows us even, again, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, how we look at our world and the things that come our way and the responsibilities we have makes all the difference. All right, the cupbearer and the baker. Or did anyone have any other questions or comments on Joseph being in prison so far? We'll continue with it. Going in Genesis 40, sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officials, and the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the 2 men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. All right, first of all, why are the positions of these two men significant? I still remember hearing this story as a child and seeing like, okay, the cupbearer and the baker, you know. Why are these actually significant positions? It's not like, oh, there's the baker down the street, and there's the, what do you think, Glenn?
They were very trusted positions in a, when poisoning the ruler might be.
Yes, so these are actually, this is not just like, oh, I'm the person who bakes bread, and I'm the person who, I'm the bartender that does, that mixes the drinks for Pharaoh and makes his favorite ones. Now, these were people who really were very trusted by Pharaoh or any rulers of their time to say, okay, I trust you to give me the food and the drink that I'm going to have that's not going to poison me. Because that was a pretty popular thing to do to rulers. So that's why they were significant positions. To whom does Jacob ascribe the wisdom of properly interpreting dreams? What did he say at the end there? Yep, he said, doesn't all interpretations of dreams belong to God? And notice too, again, we see Joseph's sensitivity. He sees that these two guys are glum, dejected, and he's concerned for them. He said, well, what's going on? Why are you so upset about? So once again, Joseph does his job, not just to do the job, but he does it with sincerity and actual care for the people who are in his charge. Let's see what their dreams were. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, in my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand. This is what it means, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand just as you used to when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. On the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. This is what it means, Joseph said. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. What interpretive rules was God leading Joseph to piece together in his analysis of these dreams and the aftermath of these events? What things were common within these dreams, or what things does Joseph start to piece together with God's help?
That in each case, the 3 meant 3 days.
Okay, so you get this idea of he sees things that start to be repetitious or especially when these numbers are brought out in dreams, that, okay, this is like a time period. Okay? The same thing's going to happen when Pharaoh has his dream, and he has, 7 stalks of wheat and 7 cows, right? Any other things? Yes?
I mean, the symbol of the bird being like a negative one, of the birds picking away
Okay, so, what's going on in the dream? And the one, the cupbearer is able to, squeeze the grapes, give them back to Pharaoh once again. The other one, there's negative things happening. Birds are eating away the top of the things in the basket. And he interprets the one favorably and the other one unfavorably. The fact that the dreams are similar to each other, but doubled, if you will. There's some, there's a mirroring of the two dreams in terms of the three in the one, the three in the other. He takes and possibly realizes that, okay, this means that this is something that not just might happen, but something that's going to happen. He's going to say something like that to Pharaoh too, when Pharaoh has two separate dreams. Okay? And what bell should this ring for us if we go backwards where we had been? What happened to Joseph as a young man before when his brothers didn't like him? What happened in his dreams, right? He had the one dream where the stalks of grain, right, and they were all bowing down to him. And then he has another dream later where the sun, moon, stars, and 12 stars are bowing down to him. 11 stars. So God is taking and using this to prepare him. And it's with, of course, as Joseph admits, with God's guidance to understand what these dreams mean. And then seeing these things actually happen must have given him remarkable confidence too, going forward, right? Take and say, okay, this is what this means is these 3 days, and in 3 days you'll be restored, in 3 days you'll be hanged, and lo and behold, it happens. So that must have given him confidence to say, with God's help, in these special cases, I can correctly interpret a dream and assign what it means, and it happens. Let's look at some application to wrap things up. Joseph wore his faith on his sleeve wherever he went and whatever he did. Well, that would have been easier at home. He was now in a foreign country with foreign gods. He was pressured to reject God's way by someone who was much more powerful and lacked morals. And later he lived among prisoners, many of whom must not have cared less about religion. Yet through it all, Joseph persisted as salt and light in God's kingdom. Share a situation in your life where you confessed your faith or stood up for godliness in the face of hostility. How did it turn out?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we know how Pharaoh felt about Joseph worshiping the true God?
We'll get to that when we start to have their conversations together. But at the least we can say right now is that, Pharaoh was impressed that Joseph's God gave him the insight as to what these dreams meant. And
So he let him worship the way he wanted. He didn't try to stop him from
it doesn't say, Scripture doesn't say that in those exact kind of words. But I think we can assume, especially given all the huge amount of leeway he's going to give Joseph, and pretty much say, you've got the whole country. It's all in your hands. I don't think that Pharaoh would take and say, well, and your God's the one who made this all known, and your God's the one who revealed this to me, So, may have been a delicate balancing act there. As we've talked about what Joseph must have had to do. How can I still obey the fourth commandment, show respect, and yet at the same time be true to the Lord first and foremost? Yes?
So I have a question too. When it says the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, he forgot him. What is the original word, for forget there? Is it that he legitimately just forgot, or was it more of an intentional,
I would have to look it up, but I imagine it's just their common word for forget. So it's using it like we would use it, there's different levels of forgetfulness, of course. I mean, one can honestly take and say, I forgot where I put my keys, and that there's levels of, well, I just don't care about that anymore. And I mean, I can see him being so ecstatic that I'm back where I was, and I'm back out of that awful dungeon that I was in. Life is happy, life is good, yay. That he just kind of said that he has blocked that part of his life out kind of and said, okay, I'm back in action. But he's going to say later, I'm reminded of my shortcomings. When Pharaoh has his dreams and no one can interpret it for him, the cupbearer says, oh, ding, now I remember that little thing that happened to me and how I promised to do something and either got so caught up with being back where I was and the fun of my old job, or
He might have been thinking, things are great, I'm not going to bring up the fact that this guy is in prison and asked me to get him out.
yeah,
Well,
could be.
if it wasn't something with the religion as well, too, that, like, well, I don't believe what Joseph believes, so I'm just gonna not, say that's how it, that makes sense.
And people had to be, I'm thinking now about like Nehemiah before King Artaxerxes. I mean, he's nervous, even though he was the king's cupbearer, he's nervous to bring up anything to him, even to be sad in his presence. We look at some of these things like, wow, how much power must these kings have had? But they had a lot. And if you rub the king the wrong way, goodbye, So, yes.
If it wasn't broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, I guess so. Just let it be, right? I don't want to disturb Pharaoh with. And by the way, Pharaoh, there's this prisoner that I knew. Let me talk to you about this prisoner. Sometimes in your life where you may have stood up to ungodliness or confessed your faith. I can think of a couple. I remember when I was in college, a history major. I had a couple different choices for my 400 level history class, my final history class, where you do the big research paper and your whole semester is dedicated to one topic. And I could either take the one that was currently being offered in the fall semester and be done then, or I could wait and take the one that's going to be offered in the second semester and pretty much go through school a whole another year for one class, another semester for one class. These were my options. My options fall semester were, what was it? Women's sexuality in history was the fall one, and then the spring semester one was something like 1800 English history or something. I'm like, oh, great. I've got some real good options here. So I ended up saying, hey, I want to graduate a semester early and be done. And so I took the, women's sexuality in history, 400 level history course. And we got to read all different kinds of things. You can only imagine what they all included. And then you have to write a big paper on this. And many of my fellow history majors are, I'll say writing papers on from the feminist point of view, okay? And I chose to take and write a paper from the anti-feminist point of view. And say, well, not everything is all rosy and right in the not everything is absolutely wrong in feminism, by the way. There's some things that, But, so I took and wrote from the conservative point of view and the anti-feminist point of view and researched different people like Norman Mailer and George Gilder and I read The Feminine Mystique and kind of pulled that book apart and stuff like that by Betty Friedan. But anyway, so I wrote like the opposite kind of paper. And it turns out that my teacher of the class was actually fine with it. But that was an example where, I could have done what everyone else did and write the feminist paper and just tell the teacher what they wanted to hear and what the whole class had been going towards the whole while. But I decided to say, no, there's some things that aren't right in feminism. Some other examples, I think about this time last year, we did in the Bible study on biblical sexuality and really about homosexuality too, and what the Bible does and doesn't say about it. And, at the time, I got plenty of posts online from people who were quite hostile and attacking, and, I was able to respond to them, I thought, with truth, yet firmness and calmness, and God's word above all. And they stopped. And they actually ended up deleting their posts, so then only now my posts are left. But I guess that tells you something when someone attacks you, and then because you stand on God's word, they can't beat you. So then, because you showed them that they were wrong, and actually they were the ones who were being bitter and angry, then they deleted their post. Anyone have any other options from their own lives? Here I am blathering about my own. Anyone have any times when you stood up for either godliness or stood up for your faith in the face of hostility, and how did it turn out? Yeah,
I was just going to say, I think peer pressure can be very powerful.
it
In a
is.
group setting, it can be even more difficult.
It is. Peer pressure is, yes. And we've all fallen for peer pressure, right? Okay. All right, next time we are going to then see how God ultimately uses, Joseph being put now, doing the right thing, being put in the king's prison, how God is going to use that to now exalt him even higher than he was before and bring him closer to Pharaoh than he ever was before. We'll close with a blessing. God bless and keep us and guide us in his grace and truth and life today and always. Amen. See you next week.